Can a Brazilian team win the Club World Cup? That's what Jess and I are going to be discussing this week. So, Jess, welcome back to the podcast for a very unique tournament. I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts on this new look format. A European audience are and ahhing whether it's worth the time. Players are going to be even more tired, etc., etc. But from a South American point of view, and even the rest of the world, when it comes to African teams, Oceania, etc., this is going to be quite a unique, exciting tournament, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I mean, first of all, thank you for having me back. It's wonderful to be here. And as for the tournament, I think you used the word intrigued, and I think that's mainly how everyone is feeling at the moment because nobody really knows how it's all going to pan out and whether or not fans will get really excited. I remember we will get into it before, but at least like in Brazil, the feeling is before this new format was okay. So this is the last chance for a Brazilian club to win because next year we're going to have a different format. It's going to be a lot tougher for any South American club to win it. So there was this chatter. So we're going to see this implemented now and whether or not it translates. But we were talking just before we started recording. I think from an European point of view, it makes it more exciting because you have clubs that didn't win the Champions League, having this, or in the previous season, having a chance to win such a like a major trophy again. So usually what you would get is a club winning the Champions League, and then the Club World Cup came as like an afterthought, and then fans didn't really feel connected to the tournament, or it's just like, it's a bonus, like we won, but if we didn't win it, it's okay too. So it's like no big. And now you have major clubs playing in it, not only the team that won the Champions League. So I think the stakes are higher, and we were going to have to see if the fans are going to buy into this new idea and get behind it. But I'm excited for it. As a Chelsea fan, I'm really excited to see the new tournament and to see us. Even though we're not necessarily in the best form, just the chance to see your club playing against the very best. I mean, that's the reason why we love Champions League, isn't it? So it's another chance to see that happening and across the board and all across the world. So I'm intrigued as well, but also excited.
I think there's a few ways to look at it, and I'm trying not to be too negative in terms of European players. Some players in this tournament will be playing from this summer all the way through to the next World Cup. So there
Yep.
will be that question of, do we need these extra games? But if we look at the tournament, and there is going to be that question mark over, will teams play their best 11, etc., especially from a European point of view. But there's nearly £800 million on offer here. There's a lot of money
Yeah.
which will change the future or the next decade, especially of the African teams and even South American teams to an extent. There's going to be a lot of money to play for. But as you said there, like teams which haven't won the Champions League, this is an opportunity to earn an awful lot of money, which can go towards key transfers towards the end of the season. And it's a major trophy, right? It's probably going to be here to stay long term with this new format if it works out. And how I perceive it and how I'm trying to get more people excited about the tournament is, look, when we go into a World Cup, there's the unknown factor, isn't there? Think about Argentina versus Saudi
Hmm.
Arabia. Not many people would have been able to name two or three of the Saudi Arabia players, but they beat Argentina. Now we're going to have that unknown factor in this Club World Cup. We're here to inform our audience more about the four Brazilian teams on this week's episode. But think about the African teams going into it as well. They're going to be absolutely buzzing to be there. Huge money available for them. Weary legs with the European teams, where the South American teams, for example, are coming into it only after 10, 15, maybe 20 games in total, if you include Libertadores and Sudamericana matches. So are the weary, sort of tired European teams going to struggle against South American teams? And I'm sure there's going to be surprises along the way. That is football. So for a chance to learn about new traditions, cultures, players and teams, that's what we love so much about an actual World Cup. So that's
Hmm.
what the Club World Cup can bring. So that is me trying to get excited about it. And I love watching teams uh, like South American teams being able to come together against European teams. We never really see it, or we see one game a year with this Club World Cup in the previous format. So it's one to get excited about. And with no major tournaments, I think once all the domestic football finishes, there'll be a lot of attention on this tournament, and we will naturally get excited about it because it's football at the end of the day. So there is negatives to the tournament, but I think there's also a lot of positives, and I think that prize pot is going to convince a lot of teams to put their best players forward, which is what we want to see anyway.
And I think, oh, I'm sorry to cut you,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I
yeah.
think from a South American perspective, or for people that like you and me just love South American football, and if you look at Brasileirão, this new tournament already brought in a lot of transfers and a lot of, it changed the way the clubs are setting up their strategy in the market, and that's also very interesting. It's the reason why Palmeiras was so adamant on Vitor Roque and wanting to keep Estevao until after the Club World Cup. It's why we're getting links with European players for Flamengo, for instance. Even again, Chelsea have been linked with players before the Club World Cup. So you can see how this, even though it's a new tournament, already has this sort of impact in the market, and it's also intriguing to see how much it will change in terms of getting things done a little bit earlier in the window, if you're talking about European window, but also with the Brazilian clubs. And we are seeing that happen. We saw it happen with Palmeiras. We're seeing it happen with Flamengo. And I think it's something that's going to continue. And it's also very interesting to see how everything shifts. And it just, highlights how important it is, particularly from a South American point of view, because it's a chance for, obviously for the money, for the clubs and to organize themselves, but also for the players, because it's such a window where the eyes of the world will be, and it's a chance for particularly the young players to get a look at. So they will probably be very like putting everything out there and fighting to get those 5 minutes on the pitch where they can impress and hopefully get some sort of attention. So that's also very, very, it will be nice to see.
Absolutely. And look, Real Madrid, at the moment, we don't know exactly what's happening with Trent. They're trying to get him in early
Yeah.
for the Club World Cup and spend an extra million or two in order for that to happen. And they're the favourites. So if Real Madrid are setting the bar and taking it seriously, you'd like to think other teams will follow. Mentioning Real Madrid, who are favourites, if we look down, you have to scroll quite far down the list to get to any of the Brazilian teams, which maybe indicates nobody has any faith in them progressing. We're going to dive into it in just a moment, but I do want to take this opportunity just to talk about our Club World Cup guide, which is going to print a day or two after this has gone out. I'm not 100% sure, but it's available to purchase now for 20% off. We cover all 31 teams. I say 31 teams because we explain Lyon's situation within that, because there's an awkward playoff match, which is throwing a spanner in the works for the magazine, but every other team is covered. So if you do want the ultimate guide covering all the African teams, Oceania, South American and European, do look at buying that, which will be available as a physical magazine and a digital one. But let's kickstart with Group A, where you have Brazilians, Palmeiras? Yeah, makes sense. Brazil's Palmeiras, Portugal's Porto, Inter Miami, which I'm sure will get plenty of attention, and Egypt's Al Ahly. Jess, Palmeiras versus Inter Miami and Porto. Like, these look like really intriguing games, and I'm sure before we dive exactly into Palmeiras, I'm sure you're desperate to talk about seeing Estevao live in person in Copa do Brazil the other day. Talk me
Yeah.
through watching. He's probably going to be one of the stars of the show if Palmeiras perform, and it's going to be down to him. And I'm sure a lot of Chelsea fans are desperate to watch him, and maybe even European fans, because we've been hyping him up and talking about him
Yeah.
for a long time, and you had the luxury of seeing him in person the other day.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It actually started before the game in a way that I wasn't expecting. I went to a birthday party in a hotel, like in a rooftop. And when I got there, there was like massive lines of people outside the hotel. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, who got injured? Like, what sort of accident happened?
Mm.
And then when I got closer, I could see them all with Palmeiras tops. And I was like, oh, okay. So this is where the players are staying. Cool.
Mm.
And then I went, and as I was going to the rooftop, they were coming out, so I got to see him there as well, which was fun. But right after the birthday, I went to the game. So like 2 hours after the birthday, I went to the game, And obviously it was against my local club, Ceará. I love very much, and I attend the games in the stadiums with my sister. And so we were very excited to see him, but also we didn't want him to do that well, obviously, because we wanted to have a shot and to win the game. But it was fun because I obviously talked about him a lot, but my sister doesn't really follow football outside of Ceará. So that's all she watches. She goes to the stadium with me. So she knew about him. So it was very fun to actually see her watching him and to see her reactions, because he would do something and then my sister would look at me and go, wow, like you weren't kidding. Like there's something different about him. And even in a game where Ceará set up to pretty much nullify him and Victor Hockey, you could still see something different coming from him, a moment of magic, and every sort of a bit of breaking down the lines, it was always from him. Obviously, their goal was from an incredible assist from him, and I will say, like, it maybe in the video it doesn't look that incredible, but it was like in this he just took the ball basically with his hand and say, okay, you score now, in a free kick. So it was very impressive. Again, it highlighted the negative for me as well, which is his physicality. He's even thinner in person than I saw it on TV, and so he really needs to bulk up. But in terms of his ability, his movement across the pitch, he was, at least in the game that I watched, was very fun to watch him going back when the ball wasn't to him, marking his players, pressing when he didn't have the ball. Obviously, he was playing right wing in this game as well, but you could see him drift into the middle. At times, he was left wing, and that wasn't down to Abel. It was just because the ball wasn't getting to Victor Hockey, and he wanted to get something out of that. So just this, his ability to read the game, the way that the ball, if the ball isn't drifting towards him, he goes towards the ball to try and make something happen. He is able to see where the game is happening, the flank that is happening in, and he's not afraid to go look for it. He doesn't shy away from the responsibility. So, and you can also see how his teammates really believed in him. And so he was all the time asking for the ball, and everyone was looking where he was to try, because they couldn't really, they were struggling, especially in the first half, to break down Ceará's line. So everybody was looking towards him because they know that he could create something out of nothing. So even though we lost, it was 1-0. So I was very upset with that, but I'm not going to say I was happy, because I wasn't, but I was content, and it was a great experience to watch him live. And it's one of those moments where, okay, if he becomes the player that we think that he can be, I can talk to like the other, to the next generation, says, oh, I watch him, and it's that sort of thing. So it was a very nice experience, and it was probably the last chance that I had to watch him here in Brazil, because obviously he's moving to Europe, and Ceará won't face Palmeiras here in my state until next semester. So it was either now or never, and it was good. It was very nice to see him play, and to see how he communicates with the coach, with his teammates, and he's always trying something, which it seems like cliche to say, but when you see it live, it's like it's different. You can always see, like, he brains kind of runs in a different pace, I think, to everyone else, and I mean everyone else. It's like he's 2 steps ahead of everyone, fans and players alike.
And hopefully we get to see that in the US for Palmeiras in this group stage. I'm sure we will. I'm sure he's going to be desperate to showcase to not only Chelsea but a European audience that he was worth the money, and it's ended up going to hopefully being one of the best bargains of the last decade or so, and I'm still convinced it will be. But let's dive into Palmeiras as a whole. It is the Estevao show, but they've spent some money. It was the first time last year in 2024 that Abel Ferreira hadn't won a trophy during his time since joining in 2020, and Palmeiras weren't happy with that, and have gone out and spent over $80 million, bringing in lots of different players. You've already mentioned Vitor Roque, brought in Paulinho, who was the top goal scorer of the year before in 2023 for Atletico Mineiro. Facundo Torres has joined from Orlando City after scoring a bucket full of goals in the MLS. so many top players have joined Palmeiras, and look at the players they've already got really for this level in terms of Rafael Veiga, Richard Rios, Felipe Anderson, there's Gustavo Gomez at the back. There's so many top quality players for Brazilian football, which is not surprising to see that they're top of the league at the moment. They've barely conceded a goal throughout the tournament so far as well. And they probably, for me anyway, they head into this tournament probably as the best Brazilian team. I know you could argue for Flamengo. I think Palmeiras have a really good opportunity here. And like Messi versus Estevao in that Inter Miami game is going to be great to watch, isn't it? It's almost like passing the baton on, and I'm not saying Estevao's on Messi's level before people come for me there, but it's the next generation or the next generational talent we will see from South America. How do you see Palmeiras faring in a really intriguing group? People can read our magazine and learn a little bit more about the other clubs, and Al Ahly head into this without a head coach, which makes that a little bit interesting. Maybe that's going to be the weak link. But into Miami and Porto, Palmeiras, it's a toss of a coin as to how this group's potentially going to go, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, again, that word intriguing, it is because it's a group that doesn't have a clear favorite. We're going to go through a couple of groups where we just know, okay, this one is going to top the group, or at least this one should top the group. And you don't really have that here in the sense of maybe someone can say, oh, Porto, but I don't think they're the clear favorites. I think it's a very balanced group, and I can see Palmeiras qualifying top of the group, and I can see Palmeiras staying out of the group altogether, not qualifying at all. So it's a very interesting one to watch. I do believe they will qualify, and I want them to qualify because, okay, maybe a few Palmeiras fans will be stressed with me here, but I really admire their head coach, Abel. And the reason why I say they will be a little bit iffy with me, it's because they are not playing the most incredible football, or like football to the eyes and heavy possession, scoring a lot of goals. They are not like what people say, like unlocking maybe the potential of the players. Well, one thing Abel knows is he knows how to win, right? He wins ugly. It doesn't matter. He wins. So he knows how to set up. And I think Palmeiras so far has been the most flexible team in terms of setup, maybe with Felipe Luis as well, but Felipe is very intelligent in the way that he sets Flamengo up. But with Abel, you can see how he changes the setup and how the team lines up throughout the game. We were talking about Copa do Brasil, and you saw that. I saw that live firsthand. They started with a 4-3-3, and the minute they scored, he could see that they were not getting the best out of Ceará, and he immediately changed to a back three formation. And he has the squad and the players to do so. So I'm intrigued to see how he will do in the Club World Cup, where you have a lot of, I think, differences tactically. But he's from Portugal, so he also knows how to. He follows Portuguese league. He knows how to set up against Porto, so I think it's going to be a very interesting game as well in that sense. But I want them to go through because I think out of every club, like everyone in Brazil, Palmeiras is possibly the one that will be the hardest to beat when you're talking about a big European team. So if you think about like maybe PSG, or I'm not talking about PSG specifically, but just the way that you see play, or how Arsenal play, how Barcelona was playing, and you saw Inter as well, just going for that goal, right? Just all the time going. Abel eats it up when you have he's not someone who's going to be tiki-taka. He's going to set up defensively, as you say. He's going to hold that line, and then he's going to counterattack you and make that 1-0 win. And I think it will be the toughest to beat when you're talking about big European competition. It's a little bit different when you're talking about other clubs with similar strategies, or that he feels that Palmeiras can have more possession of the ball, which I think if you go against, you mentioned Al Ahly, I think you see Palmeiras with a lot more of the ball. So I'm intrigued to see as well, because I want them to go through, and I think they will go through, but I'm more excited about how they will do if they go through, because we're going to talk who they might face, and that will be very, very intriguing to me, because they do have the solidity at the back, I think, to sustain like a strong attack, if that makes sense. So I'm just very intrigued to see how he's going to set up. But I do admire that coach a lot, and I think if people haven't been able to watch Palmeiras, is a good chance to see how smart he is. I think if you're a Palmeiras fan, you probably sometimes think he is very infuriating. I have that. I felt that a lot from my friends who are Palmeiras fans. But if you're talking about from an objective point of view, the best way to describe it is he knows how to win. He
We'll
knows how to set up the tools that he has in the best way possible.
Absolutely, and we'll probably get one or two interesting press conferences because Abel doesn't
Yes.
hold back either. So a European audience will be able to get a flavour of the mad comments which come out of his mouth, especially if things don't go his way. But I think you've summed it up perfectly. I think the fact that, do you know what, I'll hold my hands up because I said in the Libertadores preview we did that I was worried about Palmeiras' spending in terms of the defence, that there wasn't anybody really brought in to replace Vitor Rice, and all the money went in the forward areas. So I was concerned, yet they've had almost clean sheet after clean sheet in the league. And as you said, they've been incredibly difficult to beat. And I don't think that just lies down to the defence, the men in front of them in terms of Anibal Moreno from Racing, who's been there now for over a season, has been incredibly strong. Richard Rios is part of the furniture. Felipe Anderson seems to have come into a more central role at times. But I think the signing which has stood out to me, I know you can get excited about Vitor Roque, and I think he will come extremely good for them. And him back in Brazil is only a good thing. But Emi Martinez, and not Aston Villa's goalkeeper, before others get confused, but Emi Martinez, who's had a few years in the Danish league, has come back, and I think he's such a classy player. And I think we spoke on the last podcast that I love defensive midfielders and you like fullbacks. So people are probably thinking, they're going off again about certain positions, which may bore people. But the way in which he controls the midfield, and just a really elegant player, very switched on. And this is how Palmeiras build their success, right? And before him, there was Danilo, who's been linked back with Palmeiras, which would be very interesting if that happens before the Club World Cup. Quite a bizarre one. But if we think about the players who Abel Ferreira likes to play in the middle, he looks for those solid defensive midfielders who can build from the back and put a bit more trust in front of that back line. And I think he's been a sensational signing for them. And keeping Anibal Moreno out the side has been a testament to how well Martinez has come back and sort of to being able to get back and find his stride in South American football. So it's not all about the exciting attacking players. Yes, the attention's going to be on Estevao and Vitor Roque, especially from a Barcelona camp as well, right? And La Liga fans. But those core players in the middle, especially, I've not even spoken about Rafael Veiga, right? There's a lot of talent in the middle of the park. And the fact that they go into this tournament hard to beat is why I feel like they're going to be the team to progress. Because if this was maybe a Palmeiras side of a year or two ago, when it seemed to be a bit more gung-ho when Endrick was at the front of the line, that's when they'd struggle. But yes, it's maybe slightly Mourinho-esque, isn't it, with how Abel Ferreira sets up his team. So that's what could be the difference. And that Inter Miami game, we may see a slight shift, maybe a slight basketball game there if things get out of hand, if there's an early goal, which will make it very intriguing, especially with how Inter Miami set up. But I'm of the same opinion as you. I think that Palmeiras can definitely sneak through, and it'll be really interesting to see how Porto sort of approach this tournament as well. So that's Palmeiras. Plenty of positives around them. They are likely to face PSG or Atletico Madrid, though. So maybe that is where there will be an exit for them. But no disgrace if they get out of the group. I think any South American team that gets out of the group can be a huge win, or classed as a huge win. But as I've mentioned, PSG and Atletico Madrid will move across to Group B because they will be joined by Seattle Sounders and Botafogo. Now, Jess, if this tournament was 5-6 months ago, I'd be getting very excited to see Botafogo under Arthur Jorge with Luis Enrique, Thiago Almada, the team which won the Libertadores and the Brazilian title. A lot of Europeans will be quite intrigued to see how they get on this tournament. But it's a completely different team now. The manager left. As I've just mentioned, key players have gone. They've brought in Renato Paiva, who's had some experience with the Mexican League. He joined from Toluca, but a very underwhelming appointment because John Textor, the owner, it's a really late appointment. It was a few weeks before the start of the season, and he was coming out publicly saying that they wanted to get a big name in. He was looking at managers like Rafa Benitez and Roberto Mancini, and it was going to be a huge name to lead the charge for 2025, and not to worry about the players who had left, and money would be spent. But Renato Paiva was a really disappointing, or a little bit of a meh appointment, and it's continued very much that in the early stages of the season, Botafogo have been atrocious away from home. And what I found really quite intriguing is John Textor came out and supported the manager publicly and was very much like, the players haven't bought into his tactics, and surely that's going to create a negative rift. And this Club World Cup looks like it could be a complete disaster for Botafogo, and it's such a shame because you and I, Jess, sat down only what felt a matter of months ago, 5-6 months ago, where we were saying this could be a chance for Botafogo to build and compete with the likes of Flamengo and Palmeiras, and it's over. It seems over already, doesn't it?
It does. I think if you follow them in the league, it's been very underwhelming, I think, to say the least. Um, it's tough to say, but you look at the squad, they still have a fairly strong squad, particularly if you're looking at Brasileirão. Maybe obviously not as strong as Flamengo, not as strong as Palmeiras. They shouldn't be where they are in Brasileirão as well. So I don't think we're seeing the best of players like Severino, who I really love that player. We've talked about him.
Yeah.
But it's football. So and it's not only football; it's Brazilian football. So anything can happen from now to the end of the club to the beginning of the Club World Cup. So maybe the entire squad shifts and the new manager, anything can happen, or maybe they just find a way to work together. But as things stand right now, I think they have close to zero chance to make it through, with what we are seeing now, and also how well PSG are doing and how strong they look and how strong Atletico look, because it's not only a case of Botafogo aren't in their best form, it's a case of the other two, obviously big heavy hitters, are doing, and they are in a great form. So it's just very unbalanced. And if Botafogo manages to qualify, because again, it's football, anything can happen, right? We've all seen some crazy things. It will be like, I think it would be probably the biggest surprise in terms of Brazilian football. It would be if Botafogo were to qualify. But honestly, the way they're playing right now, I really can't see it. It would be a chance for me to watch more Severino, because I really adore him. Maybe Hugo Jesus can get some looking as well. But yeah, it's looking pretty bleak at the moment, isn't it?
I think it's going to be an interesting tournament for Jorge Jesus. Obviously, there was a lot of talk about him last season, made his way into the Brazilian national team, scored on his was it his debut he scored against Chile?
Yeah.
I think it was, but he scored within the first couple of games. Turned down a lot of European interest because he wanted to be part of the Botafogo project and get those titles, which he did, so he made the correct decision there. But he almost got priced out of a move in the end, because he moved across from UAE for nothing, and then John Textor was demanding 20-30 million, which seemed a little bit steep because he's not a natural goal scorer. He isn't someone who's going to score every single week for you. He has other attributes. But this is a big tournament for him in terms of, if he performs well, this is going to be maybe one of his last chances for a big, quote unquote, big move, or to a top European side. So he has to have a good tournament. But then when we look at PSG, Atletico Madrid, how many chances is he going to get? Because Botafogo are struggling to create opportunities at the moment domestically, scraping past Venezuelan teams in the Copa Libertadores, and then all of a sudden have to play these powerhouses. So it could be a case of what if for Jorge Jesus. He's seen top players come and go over the last 5-6 months, and maybe he's missed his opportunity, and maybe a sideways move to another Brazilian team may happen. But there's going to be a lot of attention on him just purely because he's one of the young few Brazilian strikers, and European eyes are always looking across now to see who can we prize away, who's going to be the next top talent. And maybe European football fans may be a little bit underwhelmed, but I think it would be harsh to judge him solely on this Club World Cup because they're coming up against incredibly difficult teams. But I agree with you there. And Jefferson Savarino, he's 28, 29, but you could say that he has more of a chance to move across to the European team. I think there was a few La Liga teams looking at him. He was sensational last season, but there seems to be something wrong within the camp at the moment. Maybe there is a rift between the management and what has happened in terms of what they were building to where they are now, and it's just not going to be a successful tournament for Botafogo, sadly. We'll move across.
I'm sorry. I think you mentioned the struggle and the maybe a potential rift. I think that's the norm when you're talking about getting rid of your best players, and in a sense, it's tough because you think about Almada and you think of, okay, you know it's going to happen, so you have to prepare, but you didn't see that happening in terms of the transfer market. So I think if you're someone like, as you mentioned, Savarino, number 10, he's already 28, and he won major trophies with Botafogo, and you see that whole side kind of crumble in the sense of getting rid of I mean, in my opinion, their best player in Almada as well. So it's maybe that already have an impact, and also now the problem with how they're not performing and struggling to, as you mentioned, to create chances, that has to have some sort of impact. But again, there's a long time until, I mean, in football terms, there's a long time until a Club World Cup.
Sure.
So we're going to have to follow and see if something shifts.
Let's move across to perhaps a more promising team than Botafogo, and a group you're probably very excited about. It is Group D, where we have Flamengo, the Premier League's Chelsea, Esperance de Tunis from Tunisia, and we are still awaiting to find out who the fourth team will be. There'll be a playoff match between Mexico Club America and LAFC from the MLS, as Club Leon were kicked out. If you want to know more about what's happened there, that's all within the magazine, so do pick up a copy. My last plug, I promise, for this episode. Intriguing group, right? Flamengo, Chelsea. That's going to be very interesting. Felipe Luis, who's in charge of Flamengo, ex-Chelsea, ex-Flamengo. And for an audience who maybe haven't listened to our previous episodes, well, Felipe Luis was drafted in for Flamengo to almost see the season out last year. And here we are 6 months later, and he has 3 trophies under his belt, only 1 or 2 defeats in almost 30 games now. And what has been so interesting about Flamengo is they've gone for big names now for the last 2 or 3 years, trying to achieve success, and they've all come in and they've all failed within their own rights. Yet Felipe Luis has come in, and now he's perceived as one of the best managers in Brazil, one of the best young managers, and was even linked with the national team, as we've previously discussed, which was, I think that's maybe down to a lack of managers. But take nothing away from Felipe Luis, who has steadied a sort of sinking ship, really, and he's able to manage a team with high profile players, maybe some big egos, and has really brought this team together, and they rarely lose under him. So that Flamengo Chelsea game looks to be incredibly interesting, and we obviously don't know the other team at the moment, but whoever wins that could potentially finish top, right?
I think if you look at this team, like the expectation solely based on it's be Chelsea topping the group and then Flamengo qualifying second. That's an expectation, which doesn't mean that, as again, anything can happen. I'm truly looking at this objectively. You mentioned how Felipe Luis was able to manage and is being able to manage such huge profile players, and I believe it's obviously, it has something to do with how well he did as a player. He won a lot of major trophies, and how respected he is. So those big players can look up at him and say, oh, he won this and this and this, and he has been here, and like he knows what he's talking about, and that player relationship, I think, really helped him there. But he's also very, very, very smart. He's very intelligent, and as you mentioned, we talked about him, I think, in detail before. Flamengo is a very interesting team. I think the best thing that they had was Pedro coming back, and we talked about him before. And you mentioned how Igor Jesus wasn't a goal scorer, but here we have a true goal scorer, a player that, even if it's not, one that you go and your eyes like fill with joy watching, he just knows how to score goals. And we call him that sort of player, homem gol in Brazil, which is someone who just he's gonna score. You know that he's gonna create. You know, it's gonna happen. You don't know how, but it's gonna happen. And he is that sort of player. I think it's their biggest asset. Obviously, we talked about Arrascaeta as well, Uruguayan player who I would say to every listener out there, just pay attention to him. If you haven't been able to watch him either for Flamengo or for Uruguay, he's he's a class player. He's a very, very good, intelligent, intellectual player, knows how to pick his passes, but is also very good with his pressing and how he moves off the ball as well. And obviously, Flamengo is linked with pretty big names in the market already. I think one of them is definitely going to happen. The other, I'm saying names because I don't know if you want me to talk about them yet.
Let's do it.
But
We're here, aren't we?
yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so they have been linked with both Jorginho and João Felix. I think the Jorginho deal will happen. Like I think it's mostly done by now. So we're probably going to see him playing for Flamengo, which you know, it's going to be interesting to see because he is not the most fantastic off the ball in terms of pace. So that would be interesting. But in terms of his vision, it's going to be very, very interesting to see. And Flamengo knows how to score a lot of goals. If you watch their latest games, you know, they have won recently 6-0. They won against Corinthians recently 4-0, I believe. So they are different to Palmeiras. They are a team that creates a lot of chances. So I think Jorginho will fit right in. And as for João Felix, I think they have inquired about him, but I really can't see it happening. I would be surprised if that were to happen. And it's funny because at least, like from Brazilian perspective, from Flamengo fans, the fans seems, you know, they seem really divided. I've seen people say, oh, we're going to get the best out of him.
Yeah.
And you're going to see, you know, João Felix from Benfica, and at least in Brasileirão, he's going to stand out. And others are saying, you know, this is too much money for a very inconsistent player. Not enough, you know, he doesn't offer much. We have better options for lower prices. But I really can't see it happen. I'm not sure. I don't think João Felix will be interested in a move from Brazil. I might be wrong here, and we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks or months. But I think Jorginho will happen, and I think we'll see Jorginho together with Felipe Luis both playing against Chelsea. So that will be also something to look out for. Both plays for Chelsea as well. So, but yeah, it would be very interesting. My expectation again is that Flamengo finishes second, and my hope is that they finish second as well. Because come on, but it will be fun. It will be a fun game. And also, if you're talking to a listener who's seen previous episode, you have Nudge, who obviously is featured in the couple clubs, incredible person and incredible professionally as well, knows a lot of football. She's also a Flamengo fan. She's a Chelsea fan and a Flamengo fan. So I feel like it's going to drive her crazy, but it's also going to be a fantastic moment. And she's watching the match live. She's going to the US to watch it there. And so it will be
doing a little bit of reporting for us as well. So definitely on that game. So keep an eye out for content around that as well.
Yeah, so it's going to be incredible. It's just I think it's the game that I'm most excited for obvious reasons, but also from a footballing perspective, just the way that Flamengo play and they, you know, scoring a lot of goals. It's not a game where I feel, from an objective point of view, if you're watching Palmeiras, sometimes you go, oh no, this is dull, right? If you're not into the whole tactically apt and all of that. With Flamengo, again, Felipe Luis is very smart, but he sets up in a 4-2-3-1, creates a lot of chances. So it's more entertaining for the eye of someone who's not a fan of either club. And Chelsea are slowly finishing, like getting back to their best, finishing the season in a positive way. So if they go to the Club World Cup in this way, we're going to have a very intriguing match, and potentially with a few goals, as any fan can be excited with that. And yeah, so it's definitely one that I'm looking forward to.
I think what is quite interesting with Flamengo, they're scoring a lot of goals, but they work so well as a unit out of possession, and it seems to be a case of this season, especially under Luis, to press so high, catch teams out, and that could be really interesting if Chelsea aren't smart or aware of this, or come into this like after a busy schedule, especially with the race to the Champions League going right to the wire mentally, and then to go and face a rejuvenated Flamengo side that will press high, can score goals, continuously attracts big names or are talking to big names. They love having this glamour name, really. And I know a European audience might be saying Jorginho isn't a glamorous name, but for Flamengo, they've always been after like a star-studded name, and their team is full of superstars. You've obviously mentioned a few as well, and even if they are only talking to João Felix, it shows how serious they are going to be taking this Club World Cup, and they want to get a couple of extra big names in to show to the world that they can compete. And yeah, that tie with Chelsea, I mean, obviously there's a huge gulf in terms of how much money is between the teams, but as you said, there will be some shocks and surprises along the way, and they could be arriving in. I know it's still a month out, but at the moment they've been in such a good moment for 4 or 5 months now, and they are fighting for the shirt with Louise, and I think that counts for an awful lot. So it will be really interesting to see who joins them in that group. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to predict at the moment, but we will see a good
But it was
performance from Flamengo.
yeah, it would be interesting also from a South American point of view because Chelsea play obviously with Enzo Fernandez. So even from, an Argentinian midfielder against like a Uruguayan midfielder with Arrascaeta, it's also something that they're used to, right? So from the national team. So that's always very nice to see. And to see it happening from an European club with a South American club makes it that much more interesting. But yeah, I think with the press, as you mentioned, if Chelsea can beat that press, they have players that can really hurt Flamengo, which is why I think maybe we'll be seeing a couple of goals. But it's just even if I weren't Brazilian and not a Chelsea fan, I would be intrigued to watch that match. I think that I'm predicting it. Maybe I'm hoping that it is, but I'm predicting it to be one of the better matches of the first phase of the group.
Absolutely. Let's jump to Group F and talk about the final Brazilian team heading to the Club World Cup, and that is Fluminense, who will be with Dortmund, Mamelodi Sundowns, South African champions, and Korea's Ulsan. So a really quite intriguing group, and what almost made this incredibly fascinating is Fluminense stayed up on the final day of the season. They could have been heading to the Club World Cup as a Serie B side, which would have been madness. So they've qualified, having won the 2023 Copa Libertadores under Fernando Diniz. Fernando Diniz is apparently rumoured or close to joining Vasco, so that's a conversation for another day. But great to see Diniz back because he is box office. But he's not going to be at the Club World Cup, sadly. But Fluminense, it's really interesting one because last season was an absolute car crash. They brought in Mano Menezes to sort of steady the ship and steer them towards safety. In fairness to him, he did do that, but after one game in the Brazilian league this season, he was dismissed. A very negative, boring style of play. I don't think he got on with a couple of the players, especially Marcelo, which a lot of people would have seen across social media, which went viral. Very interesting, but he's out. And Renato Gaucho, who's come in for, I think it's his 5th stint at Fluminense. It's his 4th or 5th. He is part of the furniture. He keeps finding his way back to Fluminense. And to be fair, I had them down to have a really tricky start to the campaign, and I didn't fancy them to have a strong campaign. And so far, once again, I have got it wrong because they've been absolutely flying in Brazil. Okay, we can have a look at the schedule, and they haven't really run into any of the Brazilian giants yet. They did beat Corinthians on their own patch, which was very impressive, but Corinthians were going through a managerial change at the time. But Fluminense, if we look at the squad, it's going to really struggle, I believe, against Dortmund. I think Dortmund is the standout team within the group. But with Mamelodi Sundowns and Ulsan, it's going to be a real scrap for this second place. But Fluminense will fancy it, won't they, Jess? They don't have a strong team, but the group is the weakest out of all 4 we've spoken about.
Yeah, and that's the reason why, the same way that I look to Botafogo and I say, okay, if they qualify somehow, it's going to be a big surprise, but nobody expects them to. With Fluminense, even taking everything into account, if they don't qualify, for me personally, it will be a surprise. Because you're just talking of a few matches. I don't think they have a strong enough squad to go much further. But they have a good starting 11, at least good enough to qualify in the group that they are at. And as you mentioned, Renato Gaúcho, and they are also, but at the same time that I say that, I can recognize that right now they have the biggest question mark, because Renato has only been working for, I think, a little bit over a month with them.
Mm.
But already he managed to, steady the ship. They have a way that they play. They're not, Renato is not as flexible in terms of different formations, but he particularly when you're talking about just when he gets in the job, how he has this ability of getting the players to buy into his philosophy. Sometimes after a few months or a little bit later, you can have a rift with him and the hierarchy, or with him and the player. That's very common with him. But just when he comes in, he has that charisma, right, where the players buy into it. And I think that's what Fluminense needed at this moment in time. And I do think that they might surprise people in this Club World Cup. And just because, as fate will have it, they are part of the weakest group out of every Brazilian team that we've covered. So I do think that they can qualify. I think they are looking at the group thinking that they can qualify. And I would be surprised negatively if they don't make it out. And also one thing I would say about Renato that you also mentioned, that he's already like part of Fluminense in a way, is that he knows their academy to a T, right? So he has a knowledge of how the club as a whole functions. And with Fluminense, a club that it's not going to be investing a lot of money like maybe Flamengo, like you see with Palmeiras, it's so important to use their academy. And they have one of the most known academies in Brazil. They are known for like fast-paced wingers, and so to have someone that can understand that and can find and utilize players that are coming through might be important when you're talking about kind of trying to create a better squad to be able to compete and have know how to and when to rest players. So I'm looking forward to that one as well.
Definitely, and he's been experimenting in the Sudamericana with a lot of youngsters as well, mainly because of the fixture congestion, but he's given them a chance, and you never know, one or two may have a good tournament, and then, well, Fluminense produce and sell good talent all the time. They are one of the best clubs, as you've said there, with their youth academy, and I think there's such an incentive to finish top of this group. It will be very tough against Dortmund, but if they finish top, they are likely to avoid Inter Milan in the next round, and then you're facing Monterrey, Uraba Red Diamonds, or River Plate, which you could look at that, and Fluminense fans will see that as an opportunity to progress even further. And before you know it, they could be the most advanced South American team of the whole tournament, which is quite bizarre to think. But that game against Dortmund is going to be a huge decider, as we've spoken about with a lot of these games. It all sort of hinges on whether or not a Brazilian team can beat the favourites or European favourites within the group. If Fluminense are to achieve anything, it's going to be down to John Arias, who has been so loyal to this club. He's been absolutely excellent. He's had so many opportunities to even move to another Brazilian club, and there's been European teams sniffing around for such a long period of time now. He's 27. Once the 2023 Libertadores team seemed to unravel, I almost expected Arias to be one of those to leave, and
I think
he
everyone
hasn't.
did.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if it was to do with the birth of his daughter and whilst he was settled in Brazil, and obviously he was in the Colombian national team. So perhaps he was enjoying his life in Brazil, and who can blame him for that? And he is the star of the show. And I think if teams are wise in this group, they will look to potentially double up on him or look to prevent him, because he is the one who is going to be providing the assists. See, his goals are fairly sporadic, but his work on the right hand side and the way in which his assist tally has sort of risen over the last couple of seasons, even when Fluminense have been poor, it's all come through him. And he's on set pieces. He takes very interesting penalties. When they go in, they look good. When he misses, he looks a fool. But he's very strong normally on set pieces. And like I said, everything goes through him, because there isn't many other players within the team who can take the game by the scruff of the neck, so to speak. Yep. He is their Estevao, really, where maybe that's where Fluminense are going to be a little bit weak. But look, John Arias, he's a quality player. I just think that he's going to have a lot on his, a lot of expectations on his shoulders, but he's performed well for Colombia. He's done well in Copa America last season. So he could be a player who could potentially earn a late move if he wants one. It doesn't seem like he does, but he definitely deserved his own little mention within this podcast because he's a wonderful player, isn't he, Jess?
Yeah, I truly, I don't know. I think we've talked about him before when we were talking about Fluminense, maybe last season. He is a very like interesting in terms of, as you mentioned, the assists and how he creates. But I'm always very impressed by his work ethic. As you mentioned, even when you're talking about the Fluminenses right now, and you see someone who's a star player, and you will see them not necessarily want to track back and all. He was never like that. He is the first one, and he's always gives everything. And I think that's why Fluminense fans adore him. Obviously, you mentioned his loyalty and all of that, but his work ethic is also very. I'm always very impressed by it. He's just a fun player, and I think anyone that watches Fluminense will enjoy watching him as well, as you mentioned.
Before we wrap up the podcast and I ask you the question I think I know the answer to when it comes to Brazilian teams at the Club World Cup, is there any player out of the four teams we haven't spoken about who you think which a European audience should be focusing in on, or is it all about Estevao?
I mean, I would like to give a different answer, but it's tough, isn't it? I think even if I gave a different answer, like everybody, it's who everyone wants to see. Even in, like if you're talking about the media in Brazil, is what everyone wants to see is how he fares when you're talking about different leagues and European leagues, and especially with his physicality, is he because of how young he is he going to shy away? Which I can answer you right now, he's not. He's not going to shy away, but it's just discussions that we have and how he's going to take on this new challenge. And every eye, I think, in Brazil will be looking, in terms of player, will be looking to him. In terms of club, I see the most chatter around Flamengo, at least here. I maybe because of Felipe Luis and his connection to European club, and also because Flamengo fans kind of bought into a internet war of sorts with Chelsea fans, and it's just a meme war as a Brazilian would. So it's just that funny aspect already brings a lot of the media around it as well. But in terms of players, I think he is the one. I think he is the one. I'm for sure. For me, obviously, yeah, he's the one that I'll be following very, very closely. But I'm going to say that I'm intrigued to see Vitor Roque. You mentioned early on how maybe Barcelona fans will look at him, and I think, from a Brazilian perspective, right? I always really like him. I wasn't in love with him, let's say, in terms of the player, but I always saw a lot of quality and potential in him, and sadly, it didn't work with Barcelona. And now that he's in Palmeiras, he had a tough start, right? So for him to find his feet, and he scored twice and it was offside, and so he finally managed to score, and I we mentioned, I think, in the last episode, how that we needed that moment, right? That key moment where he would just boom. And so maybe we'll see that. And so I'm intrigued to see where he's going to be at once the Club World Cup starts. There's still a couple of weeks, where he can get his understanding with the Palmeiras side even more. But it's also a good opportunity for him to show, like, hey, I'm still here, I'm still young. And so I think it's also one that people can look to and maybe expect something out of.
Absolutely. I think it's a good job I didn't get Peter Pankowski on this podcast, because I think he loses his head over Vitor Roque because he's been such a fan. And I get it. There's two other players I'm just going to bring to the table. I think it's interesting. If I'm going to throw up a new name, looking at Flamengo, and people are going to be looking at potentially younger players who may make that move to Europe, we have to mention the right back, Wesley Franca, who has been hot and cold, or Marmite, as we would say in the UK, whether people like him or if they don't, because he did have a move secured to Atalanta, but that didn't go through for, I can't remember what the reasons were. I think Flamengo wanted to take him to Bolivia for a Libertadores game, so that didn't work out. So potentially there's something there to look out for if our audience wants something else, instead of me talking about defensive midfielders. And I've briefly mentioned him already.
So you decided to go to fullbacks. So you decided to go with me. Yeah.
I will finish with an attacking player though, because I think Facundo Torres has settled in extremely well for Palmeiras. And
Yeah.
he was excellent in the MLS, scoring all the time for Orlando, and he's just adapted really well. Like we've said here about Vitor Roque, like once he's got his first goal now, you really want him to kick on. But I think Facundo Torres has probably been the best signing out of all the players. And I've given a lot of love to Martinez, but I think Torres could be a big player for Palmeiras during this tournament. So a handful of players, we have leaned naturally towards fullbacks and defensive midfielders once more, but we've spoken about Estevao and Torres. So some other players, some other fans who like attacking players, you have a selection for you there. So before we sign off the podcast, I have to ask you, Jess, and I think I know the answer already, but can a Brazilian team win the Club World Cup? And if not, how far can one of the 4 teams go? Can we expect potentially a quarterfinal?
Oh, this is a very tough question. And okay, I mean, it is an easy question if you're going by objectivity. And so if you're looking at it from an objective point of view and you're talking about probability, no. No, they cannot win it, or at least they shouldn't be able to win it. And I think I started, we started talking, and I mentioned how in the previous season, Brazilians were like, okay, this is the last chance the Brazilian will have for a long time, because now with the Club World Cup changing formats, a lot more European clubs and all of that. So yeah, no, I wouldn't expect it to. But obviously, there's the emotion part of me, right? So, and the subjective part, and also the part where I think everybody loves football, which is anything can happen, and it, just taking it one game at a time and see where you end up. So there's always a chance. And also, as you mentioned with Fluminense, when you're talking about the group, it's all about who you manage to avoid, isn't it? And that's true as well when you're talking about Champions League, because if and people are like, oh, you want to play against the best, and you do, but at the same time, when you're winning, you're, at least me, I'm a fan, I want to avoid everyone until you absolutely have to face that team, and then you want to win. But obviously, when you're talking about an underdog team and they manage to avoid a lot of the potential heavy hitters, and then they have one game where they have one game against a heavy hitter and they manage to go through, it's completely different if week after week you're facing. So it's all about mashup. I think, looking at, for instance, Flamengo, as you mentioned, if Flamengo can get something out of Chelsea and they can qualify top, they can go through. I think if they avoid Inter de Milan, they can go through a little bit further. Same with Fluminense. I think with Palmeiras, I'm looking back, with Palmeiras, it's really tough to see, isn't it? Because it's either one of PSG or Atleti, so it will be a little bit hotter. So it has to be either Flamengo or Fluminense doing something in their groups, for me at least, and trying to look at something like this, like an objective, where you can maybe avoid for a little bit longer the heavy hitters, or if not avoid, just get, just maybe get a draw against Chelsea, maybe get a draw against Dortmund, and then top of the group and go different, or whatever it is, and then you can go a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it will just be I'm so hopeful. I would love one club to make the final 8 and put Brazilian domestic football on the map worldwide. We know there's so many good talents at national level, and we see young players move across Europe all the time. And we talk about domestic football in Brazil, and I'm so passionate about it and have been for ages. And this is the first time that a lot of people will be watching these teams. And so this is why it's good to give insight as to where Botafogo and Fluminense are at. But it would just be brilliant to see one sort of the Saudi Arabia against Argentina. We would love a moment like that for a Brazilian team. And if they can do that and impress and show on a world stage, I think that's all I ask. So yes, a Brazilian team
One thing
won't
I
be
will
winning
say,
the cup.
No, one thing I'll say, because I was thinking now, because Palmeiras will have PSG or Atleti. With PSG is interesting because PSG doesn't have the best defense, but they score a lot of goals, and I can see them scoring against Palmeiras as well. But I think they will have a chance against Atleti. I think, even though in terms of their form, so maybe something there. Maybe that could be your moment, your Argentina against Saudi Arabia or something. We'll see.
I think we're just getting carried away because we're talking about the Brazilian teams now. So
it's our hope. It's our hope. It's our hope.
before we say anything else outlandish, so outlandish rather, we will just park the podcast there. Jess, it's been a pleasure to talk to you again about Brazilian teams. I'm very excited about this Club World Cup. Hopefully one of the teams can do Brazil proud. We'll reflect on the podcast with predictions. If Atletico lose to Palmeiras, then you just know football inside out, and we can definitely clip that
No,
up and put it back.
no,
But
I'm not. It's not my expectation, right? So it's not
of
not by
course,
a country mile is not my expectation. But
that's
if you're
clear. That's
thinking
all
about
good.
like, yeah, yeah. But if it were to happen, like once, maybe if everything goes like if every star align, that
Hmm.
perfect kind of day, and maybe Palmeiras can get something out of it. Maybe Estevao can nick something, and they because Atleti won't play how they usually play against Flamengo, against Palmeiras. I expect they're gonna have a ball. They're gonna have to try to attack. So if I can see Palmeiras defending that well against PSG, but maybe they could defend a little bit better against Atleti. So it's
Jess, all,
dreams. It's dream and hopes. We'll see.
all, all our listeners are hearing from you, Jess, is that Palmeiras are going to win this. So we're going to park
No,
the
no.
podcast there. If you have enjoyed the episode, do subscribe across Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And please do give us a rating. It goes a long way. We've had some really nice emails and comments lately. So put them public. More people want to see it, and we get people involved within South American football. But for now, we will park the episode, and we will see you in a couple of weeks' time.